Welcome to the Crypto Podcast. You can find all our episodes on thecryptopodcast.org. We're also on BitChute and YouTube. I have 4 other podcasts: the Awaken Podcast, Learn Polish Podcast, Meditation Podcast, and Speaking Podcast, as well as being a podcasting coach in case you'd like to actually get started in podcasting. And you can find everything on roycon.com. Today, my guest, currently in Switzerland, please welcome Didier Borel.
Good afternoon. Nice to speak to you, Roy.
Fellow podcaster as well, so you might just introduce yourself to the listeners.
Yeah, my name is Didier Borel. I have a podcast called The Swiss Road to Crypto. I used to be, well, as you might hear from my voice, I grew up in the US, in America, but I've lived in Switzerland most of my life, in London as well. I used to be a fixed income trader and then a fixed income broker, and I did that for many years. And that market died down I had a lot of fun at it for a certain number of years, and then that market died down basically because of overregulation and because of very low interest rates. And a little bit by chance, I discovered crypto. And of course, like everybody else, crypto meaning Bitcoin. In fact, I discovered Bitcoin. Nowadays, people, conflate all types of crypto, but in fact, the basis is Bitcoin. So I came across Bitcoin a bit coincidentally, and of course, at the beginning, I didn't take it seriously. And then somebody who I respect a lot told me, "No, it's not a scam. You got to take it seriously." And so because it came from somebody who I respect a lot, I didn't want to answer to him, "It's a scam," because the price is going up fast. So I figured I have to educate myself first before I explain to him why it's crap, why it's a scam. And then, like everybody, once I started to educate myself, I went down the rabbit hole and I found it fantastic. So and I became interested in that because I like new technologies that change the world, basically, and that's what I saw. A whole new area. It's a little bit like Christopher Columbus discovering America. He did. So there are many things you can do in crypto, and one of the reasons I'm a little bit like you, I do a podcast, is because I like discovering interesting people doing interesting things, and that's a little bit what I try to bring about on my podcast, and interesting people doing interesting things and going in new directions. So there you go.
Excellent. And because I missed a boat because I was told early about Bitcoin, but I've read a lot of books, Kindle books they were, and they were actually very poor. There was I don't know how many I read, but I was still bamboozled. And recently I've kind of seen that NFTs, I actually get it. I'm setting up stuff now. I've got artists and everything for digital art, and I really get it. And I got one book on it, and it explained it so well. And it's a shame that at the time I didn't get a book that actually broke it down into such a way that you could digest. But there's a lot of there's a lot of people, they're trying to understand it and they get bamboozled with the way people are trying to explain it to them.
That's true, and that's I sort of limited myself mostly to Bitcoin and to Ethereum. In Bitcoin, I think Andreas Antonopoulos is the best educator, so I've learned a lot from him. Also Matt Odell as well, but I agree in general that is a problem. On the other hand, nowadays you can learn almost everything for free on the internet, and that's great. I mean, I also took a course at Nicosia in Bitcoin, but in fact, I found that I didn't really learn many things. I already learned it all myself on the internet. So you either go on the internet or I can buy books. Andreas Antonopoulos' books are very good. Yeah, it's normal that you find it. I always say that it's normal that you don't understand it unless you're a cryptographer or if you're sort of in computers and distributed systems like the internet. If that is not your field of expertise, if either one of those fields is not your field of expertise, it's relatively normal and understandable that it's going to take time to understand, to get it. But once you get it, you get it, and it's great, yeah. So I can completely understand what you're saying. But once you find a good it's like anything. Once you find a good educator, in your case, a good book, then your view changes.
Yeah, I found later then Gary Gensler. There's a free MIT course on
Exactly.
YouTube, and I thought that was excellent. But and now he's actually in the government. So just your thoughts on what he's actually doing in the States.
Ah, yeah, in the States, I don't always understand. They have many different regulators, so you have the impression, on the one hand, there are different people fighting from different points of view. Well, different regulators trying to grab this as my territory. In general, he does probably understand Bitcoin quite well. I always get a kick out of the fact that we try to regulate it. So again, it's a conflation. We conflate when we try to regulate crypto, and like what type of crypto are we talking about? Are we talking about Bitcoin? Are we talking about stablecoins? Are we talking about CBDCs? There are certain things you can regulate and certain things you can't regulate, right? In my opinion. So, for example, in Bitcoin is, which I call really the only, probably not maybe the only, but probably the most decentralized and really decentralized cryptocurrency. So you can't regulate it. What you can regulate is the on and off ramps. In other words, when people go from fiat currency to Bitcoin, or from Bitcoin to fiat. So those points you can regulate. In other words, people are going to want to exchange their Bitcoin against fiat on an exchange or in a bank. So the on and on ramps can be regulated as long as you stay within Bitcoin and you never sell it and you pay people with it. There's no regulation there to be done, in my opinion. If you want to regulate stable coins, especially fiat-backed stable coins, that makes sense. If you want to regulate crypto-backed stable coins, that's going to be difficult, and then you'll see if your crypto-backed stable coin is really on a decentralized blockchain or not when you try to regulate it. And CBDCs, I don't think they're going to come for another 4 or 5 years, and so it's unfortunately, everybody of course wants regulation, because nobody in the end wants to be slapped on the wrist with a huge fine. But unfortunately, in the States, it's still confusing for a lot of people. But certainly regulation will come. Unfortunately, the only way to really avoid regulation is to stay in a decentralized blockchain and never go between your cryptocurrency and fiat money. If you stay purely within your cryptocurrency, and it really is decentralized, and nobody can regulate you.
And with the stable coin, then you might just explain that a bit, because it's something that hasn't been covered on previous episodes. So like Tether is one of a stable coin, yeah, I believe.
Yes. So stablecoins, the idea originally came from the fact that people thought that Bitcoin was too volatile to be a means of payment, because they were still counting, they were still using as a means of payment classic fiat currencies. Fiat currencies, I mean money that's not backed. Fiat currencies, money that is managed by a central bank and that is not backed by a hard asset like gold. So that's basically all the currencies we know, like the dollar, the euro, and so on. So not managed by a central institution, which is usually a central bank, and not backed by a hard asset like gold. So people thought that Bitcoin was too volatile, so let's get something. Let's get a coin that trades on a blockchain that's more stable. So first, there are what you call like fiat-backed stable coins. So fiat-backed stable coins like Tether, for example, like USDC, like USDG, which is issued by Gemini, and there are many others, are coins that. So how do you create it? What happens? Basically, for example, USDG, which is managed by Gemini, the exchange, you send money to provider of this stablecoin like Gemini or other people. You send money to them, your money ends up in a bank account, and they issue a token for you, usually on the Ethereum blockchain, but it can be another blockchain. They issue for you money on a blockchain that represents the dollar that you have sent to them. And now you have a representation of a dollar that's trading on a blockchain like Ethereum and so on. So that's fine. And it's always going to be 1-to-1 against the dollar. The problem there is there's an element of trust. Basically, you have to trust that the issuer of the stable coin, like Tether or Circle or whoever it is, did not issue $1.30 of stable coins when they only have $1 in the bank. So basically, that means you have to audit them. So you have to audit them to make sure there really is $1 in the bank, and $1 and only $1 is represented on a blockchain. And so those are going to be regulated for sure sooner or later. And even Circle, which manages USDC, which is the second biggest fiat-backed stablecoin, has just applied for a banking license. But that I find completely normal that you regulate it, because they're basically like a bank. However, I could say that once the money is on blockchain, and if the blockchain really is like decentralized like Ethereum, once it's on there, it's going to be very difficult to regulate. You're only going to be able to regulate the on and off ramps, like I said before. So that's like a fiat-based stablecoin, and those are the biggest and the most liquid, and the two or three most liquid is Tether, which is the biggest in the world, which a lot of people in Asia use. USD, so that's USDT like Tether. USDC like Circle is the biggest one in the US, and they've just applied for a banking license, or they're going to apply for a banking license. USDG, which is the same one issued by Gemini in the US, is also very big, and there are other ones. Then you have fiat-backed stablecoins, which are a very good idea. The whole idea here with not a fiat-backed stablecoin, sorry about that, crypto-backed stablecoins. You have crypto-backed stablecoins. And here the whole idea of a crypto-backed stablecoin is you get away from being regulated, because you're not physically touching the dollar. So crypto-backed stablecoin, the biggest one right now is DAI, which is done by MakerDAO, which is a project that was financed by Silicon Valley venture capitalists. And what you do is, I call it a little bit like a Lombard loan. In other words, you put up collateral and we lend you money. So, for example, you'll put up at least $1.50 in the MakerDAI system. You'll put up you over collateralize, so you put up at least $1.50 worth of ether. Usually, you put up, in fact, about $2 worth of ether. So you take some ether, you put it in a smart contract. You go to the Ethereum blockchain, you go to their site, you transfer some of your ether into a smart contract managed by them, and you put in, say, $2 worth of ether, and they're going to issue for you a coin that's called DAI, which is always going to have a value of 1-to-1 to the dollar. So now you have a representation of, you have DAI, which is always going to be pegged 1-to-1 on the dollar on the Ethereum blockchain, but I think they're only on the Ethereum blockchain. And so you're putting up collateral, but crypto collateral. So we're never touching the dollar, and they're issuing something for you that's always going to be worth 1-to-1 towards the dollar. And if the value of your collateral goes down, so in other words, if the value of ether goes down below 150% of the dollars that we've issued for you, you get a margin call, and you have to put up more, so that you're always covered by at least 150%. In Switzerland, in fact, there was recently there's now been a new stable coin called Liquidity, where you have to put up much less collateral, 110%, and there's no interest on it, whereas on the MakerDAI system there is small interest on it. So there are more and more of those coming, and those are going to be also more difficult to regulate, because in fact you're never touching the dollar, and that's so if the whole idea of crypto or blockchains is to have a decentralized, censorship-resistant database, and to get away from regulation and censorship by a regulator, you have to get away from the dollar. So that was the whole point here. And so those are interesting projects. They're not yet as big or as liquid as the fiat-backed ones. And then there are also algorithmic stable coins, which I have to say I don't know that much about, like Terra has a stable coin called Luna. And I have to say I haven't really studied them to know really how they work. I think you have to burn a stable coin and they issue one for you, but I couldn't really tell you how they work because I haven't really looked at them.
What are the gas fees then with when you're using stablecoin? Is it the same or is it different?
It is. So often people will go on a second layer solution of Ethereum like Arbitran, or they'll go on to another blockchain like that's usually like a fork of Ethereum, and there you get lower gas fees. But Yeah, I haven't used it that much. When I try to pay people in stable coins, few people will take it, and I have the impression many people, like if I go abroad and I want to pay a hotel, instead of going through a classic bank transfer and everybody taking their couple percent, I'd rather pay them directly in a stable coin. But unfortunately, often, but the hotels I go to haven't wanted to take it yet. So I think a lot of people who use stable coins are traders, relatively day traders in various cryptocurrencies. They'll make a small profit in whatever there is they're trading, and then they want to take their profit and keep it and don't want to suffer the volatility of crypto markets, so they put it in a stable coin for a couple of days and wait for the next trade. So meaning I don't do very much of that myself, so I don't really follow the fees that much. But certainly the fees on Ethereum are high because Ethereum is a victim of its success, and so everybody wants lower fees, so they go off on other blockchains that are similar to Ethereum, but they'll have lower fees, like Poly or second layer solutions of like Arbitrum. But yeah, there you go.
I'm assuming there's no problem putting stable coins onto a cold wallet, or must you just keep it within the system? Like you mentioned Gemini, where you'd be getting it. Are you able to actually, do it like your normal crypto?
Yeah. You can also, so you can leave it in an exchange, or you can also put them on a hardware wallet. Absolutely. That's the whole point. Is that the whole point is to eliminate the friction of going from a cryptocurrency back to a bank. Every time you want to, that was the whole point of stablecoins. Is like, we like Bitcoin, but we want to take our profits and we want the money to be stable. Okay, send it back to the bank. No, that takes 2 or 3 days. There's fees, there's friction. Can we keep it on blockchain instantaneously for more or less free with much less friction? So that was the whole point. Yeah. So absolutely, you can either keep it in your hardware wallet or keep it in exchange or wherever you keep your crypto. Absolutely.
And which wallets and exchanges would you actually recommend?
Ah, wallets, I have several, but there's one, a Swiss one that I like called Bitbox because I like the design and it's cool. But I've used Trezor, Ledger, Bitbox, but there are other ones that are very good that I've never used, like Cold Card or things like that. And
And
exchange.
on that, rather than just staying on the wallets, because it's only the ledger that I've used, have you found advantages and disadvantages from the three that you mentioned?
No, they're quite similar. Ledger and Trezor are quite similar. The interface is quite similar. They're all using the underlying same technology, which is I forgot what the number is, 34, 36, or 32, or whatever it is. Um, uh, uh, Bitbox, the interface is a little bit better. You use a little bit your fingers, but it's a little bit more like cool design. A little bit like if you like Mac design instead of vulgar or whatever Microsoft products or whatever, you go for Bitbox. And plus, their CEO has been a core developer of Bitcoin. The other ones I know of, people like other ones that I've never used, like Cold Card and things like that, saying they're safer. But I don't know what the interface is like. But I I also run my own node. I find that a little bit like you. In other words, if you say that to having your own hardware wallet, having your own node, maybe some people listening to this will be intimidated by that. You must be an expert. That sounds difficult and all that. And I find, in fact, it's just as easy as managing your e-banking account or your email. But before you get started, you find it difficult and intimidating and so on. But like you, if you have the proper book or the proper tutor to take you by the hand and show you how it's done, you will see in the end it's just as safe and easy as running your own e-banking account or whatever. So there you go. Now there are videos on YouTube on everything. So
yeah, not exactly. And with the proof of work and proof of stake, then I mean, I know that Ethereum is supposed to go to the proof of stake, because I see with the NFTs that if you're, the gas fees can be high. So just your thoughts on that.
yeah. Well, of course, I think, unfortunately, that proof of stake is the fastest road to centralization, and I'll tell you why in a second. But if you like, let's not forget what the basis is. Let's not go back to the fundamentals. A blockchain for me is just fundamentally, it's just another way of organizing a database. That's really, for me, that's really all it is. It's another form or method of organizing a database. And if you organize your database in a proper, well-known, in a proper blockchain, it's decentralized. You obtain one quality that you never obtain anywhere else. And that quality is censorship resistance, or that property is censorship resistance. So if you organize your database in the form of a blockchain, you obtain censorship resistance, and that is a tremendous quality that you can only get in that form. But to get censorship resistance, you need decentralization. You cannot obtain censorship resistance with a centralized database. So for me, I don't like proof of stake because it's the fastest road to centralization. So what do I mean by that? Proof of stake, you first have to own coins that you're going to stake. And then when you are a staker, you are going to take all the pending transactions or the pending transactions in a blockchain, and you're going to put them together, and you're going to validate them and put them in a block. And that's going to take much less energy than on proof of work. However, you need coins to stake. And when you validate blocks, you get compensated with more coins. So that means if I own 70% of the coins, or if I own a large proportion of the coins, they'll tell you they choose the stakers randomly among the coin holders. But if you own 70% of the coins, you're going to be chosen randomly 70% of the time. Whereas in a proof of work system, you don't have to own any coins to form another block. You just need hashing power. So in a proof of stake system, if you own 70% of the coins, you're going to be composing 70% of the blocks, and you're going to end up owning more coins because you get compensated by getting fees and more coins. And then they'll tell you, yeah, but we're going to make sure that if you compose the last block, you're not going to be able to compose another one for whatever, 2 weeks or 10 blocks or whatever it is. And that I don't understand either, because what does that mean? Does that mean, therefore, you have a list of names and a list of coins? Because if I own 70% of the blocks, I'm naturally going to be chosen 70% of the time. And if you tell me I can't compose another block for another 2 weeks, what does that mean? You have the name of you have a number and a name for all my coins? I don't understand how that works. So for me, it's the fastest road to centralization. Plus, most people are not going to be, like, for example, in Ethereum, you have two sort of statuses. You have validator and staker. So to be a validator, you have to run some hardware on a node, and you have to have at least 132 Ether coins. So that's already quite high. That's more or less $400,000 of Ether. If you're not a validator, you can be a staker. In other words, you have less, for example, than 132 coins, and you don't want to go to the trouble of running the node. You can be a staker and delegate your coins to somebody else, and they'll stake, and you'll get part of the reward. So you can stake, and they'll get part of the reward. So who's going to end up being the validators? The validators are going to end up being people like, for example, Coinbase and Kraken, who offer this service now to their clients. Give us your coins and we'll validate into our validating node, and we'll, as a staker, you'll get some compensation for that. So basically, that's also another, we're going to centralize all the coins, and then in the end, the big validators are going to end up, sort of running the show. So that's another reason why I don't like proof of stake. Whereas, in proof of work, if you own 0 coins, can you contribute to consensus and form more blocks? Yes, you can. If I own 0 coins and the guy next to me owns 20% of the outstanding coins, does the guy next to me in a proof of work system, does he have an advantage over me? No, he doesn't. He only has an advantage if he has a lot more hashing power. You're not you can form consensus and you can validate blocks in a proof of work system with 0 coins. They'll tell you, yeah, but the guy next to you has 20% of the hashing power, so he owns 20% of the network. I'll say, yeah, no, but not quite, because people make hardware improvements all the time. You can find another software algorithm to mine faster that might give you an advantage. And Yeah, so that's why I don't like proof of stake. But we a lot of blockchains will end up for sure going to proof of stake because people want people want speed and they want low fees. And the fastest way and the best way and the only way to get to speed and low fees is centralization. So we'll end up going to and censorship resistant isn't all that important for many things. It's only really important for money. Money is the ultimate application where you need censorship resistance. For many other things you don't. So we'll go there, and it's but I have no problem with that. Just don't sell me the idea that you have a decentralized censorship resistant blockchain. Just don't sell me that idea. But you just tell me you have a centralized database, which is fine. But just be honest about what you're trying to sell me. That's all.
And with all the coins that are being created, I think it's something like 8,000 now. And I know there's a lot of rug pulls, but some that I'm hearing is they're releasing like say 10% or whatever. I mean, that's like the Federal Reserve. They have their own printing press and they're releasing a certain percentage. Like it's strange that actually people actually are investing in something like that.
Yes, so there are several, of course. That's why people love Bitcoin, and myself included, as a store of value. In other words, uh, you know, in Satoshi Nakamoto, when you read the Wright paper, he says he invented, I forgot the first line exactly, but it's something peer-to-peer payment mechanism. So he thought he was inventing a payment mechanism. But now the way people have used it is it's become a store of value. And why is it a store of value? It's because the issuance is completely predetermined. And it never says anywhere 21 million Bitcoin, but it's derived sort of indirectly. It's the fact that we issue a certain amount of Bitcoin in every block, and that issuance amount get cut every 4 years. And at one point, you can't cut the thing in half anymore, because you can't cut a Satoshi in half. So you get at that point, you're at 21 million. So there's every node is validating all the time all these rules, meaning there is no central place where you determine the amount of money that's being issued, and every node has to confirm on every block that we only issued the proper amount of Bitcoin for that block. So that's why it's programmatic, and that's why you've taken out the control of issuance from a single person. And so that's why it's a store of value, because there'll be a limited amount. It's a little bit like if I say to you, if you own a painting by Da Vinci or Picasso, you're never going to be diluted because he's not going to make any more because he's dead. So with Bitcoin, there's a predetermined amount. And if you want to try to change that amount, it's in fact a fork. So that's what people like. So so he invented a store of value, and Ethereum, I mean, I think it's a great like tool. Everybody builds on it. It's a little bit like an Android or an iOS, but they've changed their monetary policy all the time. So that was the whole point with Bitcoin, is in fact you've taken the control out of one person and you've put it with everybody. So you got to get everybody to agree to change, and in fact that'll be in fact the fork. So yeah, I mean, if you want to have dilution, it's a little bit like, you own shares of a company and then you wake up one day and the board has said we're going to issue 10% more shares. So your participation in the company has just been diluted by 10%. That's not necessarily a problem. It just, depends what you want. If you want store of value because you have a fixed amount, stick with Bitcoin. If you're going to this coin for something else, that's fine.
I know you've also discussed why trying to blacklist addresses is useless. You might elaborate a bit on that.
Yeah, Gensler and so on, they want to, regulate Russian. Unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever. Now the U.S. dollar is going to lose a bit of its world reserve status because people see that the U.S. dollar, if the government wants to exclude you or freeze you out, they can do that. And that's what they're doing with Russia. So little by little, other people are going to notice that and not like it, and they're going to try to wean themselves off the dollar system. And then and probably China is going to as well. So then they said, these people are going to use Bitcoin Bitcoin, and so let's blacklist, let's corner them there. Let's not let them use Bitcoin. And in fact, that's a ridiculous thing. So for several reasons. One is, again, like I said, as long as you stay within Bitcoin, you buy and sell Bitcoin, nobody can stop you because it really is decentralized. They can only sort of corner you when you go on and off ramp. Second of all, people might not realize this, but for example, in Bitcoin is one of the few where for each coin you have a new address. Your wallet generates addresses. So you can send your Bitcoin to yourself to a new address, right? So they're going to tell you, this is, these coins here with these Bitcoin addresses, those are blacklisted. Well, first of all, they're blacklisted for whom? They're blacklisted. Who do they tell? The government. They tell exchanges and banks. They don't tell me. You as an individual person are not concerned. So the person who's blacklisted can send money to himself at a new address, and then the government's always playing catch up, right? And your wallet can generate, I don't know, like 1 million addresses a minute or something. So and who are they going to ask to enforce that? Only the banks and not individuals. So on the one hand, it makes no sense because the technology is faster than the legislator, because your wallet generates addresses all the time. And second of all, then you need to send money to yourself to your new address and have that put into a block. So will the miners exclude that? And in fact, history has already shown that the miners don't exclude that, because there was a miner in the US, I think it was Marathon, who, but don't quote me on the name, but I'm sure there was a miner and he was in the US. And to please the government, he says, okay, all these blacklisted addresses, I will make sure that I do not mine them and put them in a block. And very quickly, he abandoned that. First, because a lot of the, first, because those transactions with those addresses were going into blocks mined by other people outside the US, in some country where they don't give a hoot. So he was saying, I'm forfeiting these transactions and they're getting mined anyway, so it makes no difference. So he says, I'm not going to do this anymore. Meaning, that's why I say, it makes no sense, because your transaction is going to be put into a block and your wallet can generate a ton of them. They can only get you at the on and off ramp in a place where that person wants to, respect that decision. If it's a Russian who wants to take his money out on a Russian exchange, he probably doesn't give a shit about what the Americans say. So yeah, that's why I think it's ridiculous.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, very good. Yeah, no, excellent. And just finally, your podcast, you might let people know what you're covering in that.
Yeah. So I run a podcast called The Swiss Road to Crypto. I like crypto and I like, decentralization. So my podcast, in fact, in Switzerland, I think there are a lot of great things going on that are not that well known, and that's a little bit what I try to uncover. I find here that there are a lot of people who are very knowledgeable and doing interesting things, and legal system is a lot more sort of favorable than in other legal systems, and that's what I try to a little bit show in my podcast. So I often have Swiss guests, but not only. I recently did one with somebody from the Bitcoin Policy Institute in the US, because he educates a little bit the US government on Bitcoin. But that's what so I have a podcast called The Swiss Road to Crypto, and I'm more interested in discovering people doing interesting things and more cutting edge things, and keeping up with the news and discussing whether the price is going to go up this week and down next week. That doesn't really interest me, but it's more finding people doing interesting things and trying to learn something from somebody interesting. There you go.
Okay. So Didier, thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. How can people get in contact with you?
Okay, so the podcast is on, the site is called The Swiss Road Crypto. You can always send me an email there. I'm also on LinkedIn, Didier Borel, or on Twitter under @Didier Borel. And there we go. I hope I'd love to be in touch with any of your listeners. Okay.
Make sure I put the links in both the audio and the video. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Roy. It was a pleasure.
That's all for the Crypto Podcast. You'll find all our episodes on thecryptopodcast.org. As mentioned, we're on BitChute and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating. Really helps in the algorithm. Until next week, take care.